Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 19th of October 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, first of all, brief comment on the weather. We're doing very well here in Plymouth. We've got sunshine. It's a bit on the cold side. Norfolk is sunny. Holland is sunny. And what else have we got? London, unfortunately, overcast and chilly. That matches the political climate. And Rhonda there is just saying cold. So there we go. Well, how can we cheer people up today? I think the first thing to do is to get a picture of Britain's Prime Minister on screen, and here she is. And the Mirror report is one of a number of articles that are coming out where it is all becoming very confusing over whether we can actually achieve Brexit. There's High Court challenges. It's all looking very murky. But the comment from the Mirror here is that the Prime Minister's spokeswoman said she had nothing to add to the lawyer's comment that it was highly likely MPs would get a vote on the final Brexit deal. I find this interesting, Mike, that we don't deal in what the Prime Minister says, we just deal in what her spokeswoman says. And presumably the spokeswoman, as we know from questioning the government ourselves, that lady will simply be putting across the line. But what we can see happening is, of course, no intention of the Conservative government to take us out of the EU. And this was UK Column's forecast many, many months ago with the EU referendum PSYOP. So let's have a look at some of this material. Here's the BBC. BBC doing extremely well to up the ante, to get the dialogue going, to question whether we should follow the referendum to come out. So simple headline here, can the law stop Brexit? But a very, very devious calculating BBC, as we shall see in a moment.
I was just going to remark on the photograph there, because instead of the normal European flag, of course, we've got the European stars on a blue background in the shape of a heart, because we love Europe.
Yes, well, it's a good subliminal image put across there, Mike. Yeah, stars replaced. But what has the BBC really got to tell us on this page? Well, as I looked at it, I'm going to ask people to brace themselves for this, because the stunning news came up of the really critical events in Britain. So never mind Brexit. This is what the BBC thinks we should be aware of. And it was breaking news that Tony Blackburn is to return to the BBC 8 months after parting company with the corporation. So never mind Brexit, never mind the fact that Britain is bankrupt, people sleeping on the streets, overseas war. The BBC thinks that we should know that Tony Blackburn is going to go back to work for them with his Zimmer frame, presumably. So let's come back to that article. And what did they have to say? Well, they had to say this. They quoted the Times newspaper. So the crossbench peer Lord Pannick, very appropriate name, I think. He's an eminent specialist in public law, and he said whether Parliament would enact legislation to allow for an Article 50 withdrawal is a matter for it. Now, let's think about this man. He's acting as a QC, but he's also a crossbench peer. Doesn't that mean he's part of government, Mike?
Well, not a part of government, part of Parliament.
Part of Parliament, OK. However, without such legislation, the Prime Minister cannot lawfully give a notification. If the Prime Minister triggered Article 50 and put the UK on a one-way road out of the EU without Parliament's backing, he or she would be overriding the 1972 European Communities Act, which provides for the UK membership of the EU. Wonderful little paragraph there, because to my mind, this is beginning to put things on its head. They should be driving for the repeal of that act.
Well, this is very important, because what Theresa May has said is that that act will be repealed, but it will only be repealed once the deal is done. So the point he's making is that until the deal is done with Europe, the 1972 Act is still in place, and therefore he's claiming that she's acting unlawfully by doing what she's doing.
Yes. So he's a peer, he's a QC, and we'll put the last one in. It says the Article 50 process would cut across and emasculate the 1972 Act. And so the argument goes the Prime Minister needs the backing of a new Act of Parliament to give him or her. Are they not sure what sex the Prime Minister is?
maybe he knows something about her future career that we don't know.
Well, I'm shocked that he should think the Prime Minister's a man. The Constitutional Authority to push the leave button. So this is spin and a lot of dross and misinformation by the BBC. So what better place to go than to bring in Lord Panic himself? And so we went straight to the Blackstone Chambers. This is where he resides. And they say he's superstar of the bar, one of the top QCs, but he's also very approachable and he's a very nice person to deal with. So we just had a little look further into what he got involved with. And oh dear, what a surprise. He successfully represented the BBC in the Divisional Court in resisting the contention that the Director General had committed the criminal offence of blasphemy by broadcasting Jerry Springer, the opera. And following the judgment, Parliament decided to abolish the criminal offence of blasphemy. So this man has single-handedly removed the offence of blasphemy, I would say greatly undermining the Christian church in this country, but he seems quite happy with that. Well, let's have a look at another one. He also represented the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in establishing the House of Lords that state immunity applies to claims alleging torture. Now, I'm not sure whether I understand that correctly, but I think what it means is that he's established that people who have been accused of torturing people can now claim immunity so they can't be examined or investigated.
Only if they're operating on behalf of the state.
Right. Okay, well, there we go. So
makes it all right then.
So that's the state of our peers. 1 minute they are part of Parliament, and the next minute they're operating in the courts. They are, of course, impartial in the work they're doing, and they're very happy to make some questionable judgments over whether torture is going on or not. So we better bring back our Prime Minister. I'm going to treat her as a lady because I think that's only fair. But apparently the hearing, this is the counter-claim against Brexit, followed a historic legal challenge by a group of campaigners led by Gina Miller, who claim that Mrs May is in danger of undermining the sovereignty of Parliament. So a beautiful bit of spin here by the Mirror, Mike, that we are getting in the public mind that Parliament itself is sovereign.
Parliament is absolutely, particularly the government, is absolutely determined to push this lie because, of course, what we're witnessing is the divine right of Parliament to do anything. No limitations on Parliament. They have completely subverted the constitutional arrangements in this country. The Parliament, of course, if sovereignty in this country lies with the people, it doesn't lie with Parliament. But Parliament claims sovereignty. It so far mostly claiming that unchallenged, and that needs to change pretty quickly.
Very quickly indeed. Well, can we expect UKIP to be changing this? Now, making that comment, we know the immense amount of effort that UKIP supporters have done over a great many years. That is tremendous work. We're also recognising, of course, the 4 million plus people who voted, many of them as a result of that UKIP effort. But we have to come to this. At the point where the whole Brexit debate has become ultra critical, and we should be looking to leadership, at least from some parts of UKIP. We've got headlines like The Independent here, UKIP facing bankruptcy as leading donor threatens to walk away. So we've got Aaron Banks here having a meeting with other UKIP funders, because if the Telegraph is to be believed on this, the funders of UKIP are so upset about the state of the party, they're thinking about pulling their money out. So UKIP has been marched into a blind alley, and just at the stage where the drive of UKIP is necessary to expose the lies of the government over Brexit, all of a sudden UKIP is now in danger of being collapsed from the inside. And of course, UK Column has consistently warned that this was going to be the path taken by Nigel Farage, and we now say we're absolutely correct. But we're also going to suggest what can be done about this. Well, the first thing to do is obviously to attend the British Constitution Group conference in Winchester on the 19th. Now, we are starting to advertise the guest speakers. We've had Vanessa Beeley on screen before, but we're going to say what a remarkable lady this is. And she's taken huge personal risk to go to Syria in some extremely dangerous situations in order to find out what's actually happening. And of course, what we now know is Syria, an unlawful war, started with the help of the British government. And so we've got to remember that the British government and its ministers have fomented and executed unlawful wars: Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen. And this is a criminal elite operating. Let's just remember what David Cameron said. He said that bombing ISIS in Syria will make us safer. He said, we will not put boots on the ground. We know that is another lie. And he said it's Britain's duty to attack ISIS in Syria. So if you want to learn about what the British government is really about and why we need to reassert the rule of law, then do come along to that British Constitution Group conference. And alongside Vanessa and the other speakers, we will have Guy Taylor. And now Guy has done really outstanding work in challenging fraud and corruption in British courts. And in particular, he's been exposing the stealing of property and businesses through secret closed-door courts, the Star Chambers. So what do we need to do? We need to reassert the rule of law. Now, it's people like Vanessa and Guy who are taking a lead in action, taking action, and they're taking risks to do that. Let's have a look at what some people have been saying around another very brave lady, Melanie Shaw, who of course spoke out about the abuse of children in Beechwood's Children's Home, Nottingham. Well, she is still in Foston Hall Prison. We know for a fact that she has been held for over 22 weeks. It may be several weeks more in a 5-foot by 10-foot cell. She is locked up for 23 hours a day. Mail is denied to her. She's had very few telephone calls. She's had her medication, that's her long-term medication, denied. We know several of the staff are highly abusive people. She's had the majority of her visits denied, and the few visitors that she's had have been subject to a very intimidating search and literally interrogation by the prison itself. The legal team has been imposed by the court, and they have been doing nothing to apply for bail. So Melanie's unaware of her crime. She doesn't know if she's on remand or sentenced or waiting for psychiatric assessment. And she has said in one of her letters, this is never ending. Please help me. So, of course, Theresa May was the Home Secretary at the time Melanie was incarcerated, the same Theresa May who's now Prime Minister, and saying that she is there to help abuse victims. It's obscene what's going on, but it shows you the quality of Britain's politicians. So let's have a look at some of the correspondence the UK column gets. And this is an email that came in. It says, "Hi, Brian. I notice you keep referring to Miss Shaw and her unlawful detention. If it was true what you're saying, then it would be very easy to get her released. So I can only come to the conclusion that you are misleading your ever-shrinking viewers. Now, why would you want to do that? Could it be that you're a subversive little shit? Well, it's pretty obvious what you are. Have a shit day." And it's signed by Mr. S. So this gives you some idea of the type of material that UK column has to deal with. And when we simply asked this gentleman what he was actually doing to help Melanie Shaw, he didn't want to reply. He only wanted to talk about his knowledge of the law. So if that is pretty depressing, let's have a look at this excellent letter which comes in and contrast it. Because this gentleman said, what we need to do is start a sticker campaign, which means anybody posting a letter, postcard, whatever it is, any correspondence, can be advertising the plight of Melanie Shaw, particularly if it's letters to the government. And this This gentleman also enclosed a selection of stickers to show us what could be done. So here we are. If we want to highlight the difference between people, we've got the completely negative response on the left, very unpleasant in fact, and we'd like to contrast it with a really excellent letter where people are starting to take action themselves. So don't sit there and email. What we need are good concrete ideas like this one in order to help Melanie and any other appropriate cause. Get into your networks. We're going to keep pushing this. And tonight we've got the briefing in the George at Plympton. So if you're local to the Plymouth Devon area and you'd like to come along, please do. And we'll also say groups being set up in the Totnes area to also discuss what's happening in UK, the criminality of our government, and the fact we need to restore the proper constitution and the rule of law. What happens if we don't, Mike?
I think we're on our way to it at the moment. So anyway, modern slavery, it's closer than you think, apparently. This is according to the Home Office. And the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, has announced £8.5 million investment in tackling modern slavery. So that's going to go to the police, and particularly to Devon and Cornwall Police, because they're leading this initiative. What did Amber Rudd have to say about this? She said, modern slavery is a barbaric crime which destroys the lives of the most vulnerable in our society. The government has taken world-leading action by strengthening the law enforcement response and increasing support and protection for victims. We must do even more. That is why I'm announcing significant investment that will help our law enforcement agencies bring the perpetrators of this intolerable crime to justice. Our message to slave drivers and traffickers is clear. We're coming to get you, and you have nowhere to hide. Well, they seem to have plenty of places to hide in the Houses of Parliament themselves, but that's another issue. But in the meantime, what is this money and where's it going? Well, it is £8.5 million, as I say, which has been granted to Devon and Cornwall Police via a bid which they made to the Police Transformation Fund. Now, Devon and Cornwall Police had this to say: I share the Home Secretary's unequivocal commitment to further improving the UK response to modern slavery. But what I want to do here is to, this is Sean Sawyer, who's the Chief Constable on screen, by the way, at the moment. What I want to do is have a look at this Police Transformation Fund. So Brandon Lewis, he's the Policing Minister, and he was speaking to the Police Superintendents Association annual meeting in September this year. And he said that through the Police Transformation Fund, we've given police leaders the tools to support reform and to ensure that you've got the capabilities needed to be able to respond to the changing nature of crime. I accept the earlier point in the meeting that on the changing nature of crime and the challenges facing policing. We'll come on to that in a second. He went on to say this needs to be about genuine transformation that makes policing work for the for this generation and the next. We're going to transform the police. That's the key point. And he went on to say, I believe there have been important steps in the right direction, but there's more to do. Establishing the Police Reform and Transformation Board and developing the reform vision for 2020 from within policing, supported by the work of the College of Policing. Now, this Transformation Fund, there's been quite a bit of criticism of it over the last couple of weeks and months. And certainly on the Labour Party side, the police and crime commissioners that are Labour Party have written to the police and the government, really criticising it, because what seems to be happening is that the police budget is having the top, in this case, so the example they give is they whack £70 million off the top of the police budget. And then what they do is they put that into this Police Transformation Fund. And then if the police want access to their own budget, they have to make a bid for it. And what this means is that the Home Office then decides which police projects are going to get the money. And so if you want to steer transformation in the way that the Home Office wants, rather than leaving it up to the police management to decide what way policing should be run in this country, then that's a very good way to do it.
Yeah, I'm going to say, and we need to note the language, because we're not talking about solving crime, stopping crime, we're transforming the police. And the vision is the 2020 vision.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the NPCC, which is the National Police Chiefs Council, run by Sarah Thornton, that wonderful ex-chief constable of Thames Valley Police, the lady who refused to investigate
sexual abuse at OCVC,
Indeed.
Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, on David Cameron's doorstep.
So NPCC is pushing this, police reform and transformation. And their conference earlier on, this is the police reform between 2010 and 2015, the introduction of police and crime commissioners, creation of the College of Policing, because that, of course, manages the training of future police leaders, creation of the National Crime Agency, Britain's FBI, workforce modernisation, direct entry, so you come in as a graduate rather than going through the ranks, and Police Now, reforms to the IPCC, which is the Independent Police Complaints Commission, and HMIC, police pay reform, and this is the key one, abolition of national targets and stripping away unnecessary bureaucracy. We'll come on to what that means in a second. And they set up the Police Reform and Transformation Board, which Brandon Lewis referred to. It has a chairman or woman. It also has a chair from the NPCC. It has the chief executive of the College of Policing on its board, Director General Crime, Policing and Fire Group, Home Office, Director General National Crime Agency, and the chief of Her Majesty's Inspectorate Constabulary. So this board meets no less than 6 times a year. They say a delivery framework comprising the 5 elements of the vision has been adopted with emphasis on complementary activities and an all-systems approach. And of course, this change is being enabled by the Police Transformation Fund. Now, we'll come on to how big this fund is in total in a second, but this is what they say about it. Hundreds of millions of pounds. In fact, I've seen some people suggesting that it's as much as £1 billion over the next 4 years. And it's going to be used to transform police capabilities in response to the changing threat. So they have identified changing threats, particularly cyber threats, terrorism, these types of things. And apparently it's going to build new capabilities to respond to changing crime threat and support a strategic shift to prevention of both crime and non-crime related demand, work to improve the diversity of policing and create a more professional and flexible workforce with the right skills, deliver digitally enabled policing, and it's going to realign existing capabilities to deliver greater efficiency and long-term sustainability. So the summary they give, changing demand and fiscal pressures, a recent fall in crime, but a changing nature of crime. So we need to reimagine the whole system, Brian, not incremental reform. So we've got to sweep it all away, everything, last 150 years of police standards and police procedures have to be swept away and replaced with a new vision, a new framework, and new resources.
This is unbelievably dangerous language, Mike. This is the transformation language, but of course what it's showing is these people are not living in the now. What are the problems today with crime that we've got to deal with? They're working to the vision of the new society, the utopia, where it will all be okay in the future. So Brendan Lewis there never replied to any communication about the Metropolitan Police whistleblower, simply silence. They're not interested in crime, they're interested in building the utopia they believe is coming in the future.
Right. Well, if you've got questions about this to the NPCC, then Tim Metcalf is the person to write to. Email address on screen at the moment. But let's get a clue as to where this is going to end. Now, this is a private company called Crest. And Crest seems to provide various consultancy services and training services and so on. And this little article here, the £1 billion Police Transformation Fund, is by Gavin Lockhart Miriams, who's the chief executive of this organisation. I just wanted to make a couple of quotes from here. He says the programme will leave most, if not all, of the 45 territorial police forces in the UK intact as a public-facing cap badge at least. That's all he sees it as being at the end of the day. Public-facing cap badge. The real work of the police will be done, non-public facing?
Well, it's going to be privatised, Mike.
This is where we're going, absolutely. But behind the scenes, collaboration between forces and with other public services will intensify to save money, improve information sharing, and ensure the police have the large-scale, highly technical capabilities they need to face the new challenges ranging from mass casualty terrorism to online crime. And he goes on to say, to help the police respond to these challenges, the government is providing up to £1 billion of so-called transformation funding over the next 4 years. Police forces can bid for this money backed by a robust business case, setting out the benefits they expect to deliver. To build a credible case, however, forces will need commercial partners to provide strategic capabilities in change and program management, digital communications and data analysis, tactical capabilities to respond to specific challenges. So they are absolutely placing themselves at the forefront of this market to provide private services to the police. This is not only merging the police and other public bodies, but also merging public bodies, the police, and private corporations into one blob. And that is unbelievably dangerous.
Yeah, it's difficult to get the right description of how dangerous this is, but we can see the beast emerging. We know, just as 2 examples in Nottingham and Plymouth, here in Plymouth, that you have the police using the same facilities as the local council. So what discussions go on behind closed doors? We've got the MAPA teams, the multi-agency public protection arrangement, where you're bringing in the police with mental health, education, charities, local authorities, in order to spy and track people who they believe may be a threat to society. We've got the multi-agency support hubs, which are using principally social services to track and report on people who they deem may be a problem because of family issues or children. This is the Stasi state. But the big difference is this is going to be a fully privatised Stasi state. And let's remember that the key woman who has put all of this structure in place is Theresa May, the very same woman who is now Prime Minister and running the country. So if we keep our eye on the dangerous politicians, we should stay focused on Theresa May, because clearly she is several calibres ahead of Amber Rudd, who's just moved into the Home Secretary's position. What sort of woman is Theresa May? Well, she's prepared to set up the Stasi system, but she's also prepared to put child abuse survivors in prison to make sure that their evidence of the abuse rings, which impinge on Westminster and politicians, that evidence doesn't reach the light of day. Serious. Can't really put it any stronger than that. What do people need to do? You need to start talking about it. You need to start warning other people. And you need to explain to people how it works, because many people are now sensing there's change that worries them, but they can't see how the mechanism works. Well, are we going to trust the BBC? I don't think so. But interestingly, there's a little discussion in Parliament about BBC monitoring. Now, this is a little organisation that has sat in the background over a great many years, monitoring overseas communications, radio, telephone, radio or television, for example. Could be countries in the Middle East, could be anywhere in the world. They do it, as we will see in a minute, for our best interests. But they were originally funded by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. There's now the drive that they should be paid for by the BBC, which would mean the licence payer is paying for the BBC to literally spy on countries overseas. So here's the inquiry. Let's see what they're going to be doing. It says, what does the government require from the BBC monitoring service? Well, I thought the BBC
was independent.
Independent and for us, but apparently the government requires it to do things. So here's the truth. It is a government agency, and they've got to ask the Ministry of Defence, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the Department for International Development, the Cabinet Office, and the Security Intelligence Agencies, and Open Source Enterprise, as to what they should be doing with this, I'm going to say, dirty little organisation. So if you want evidence that BBC is in fact a government propaganda machine, this is the organisation we should be looking at. And if you have a look at their website, of course, it's full of bright colours and a trust us mentality, because it says that BBC monitoring observes, understands and explains media throughout the world, providing an accessible and relevant account for you to make better more informed decisions, Mike. So trust them. They're going to do the intercepts on people's transmissions, and they're going to tell us about it. I think it's dodgy whether we're going to be trusting the BBC to be impartial, accurate, and honest. But trust the BBC. We are not bright enough to understand it ourselves. They're going to help interpret it for us. Presumably like Brexit, so the BBC would have us think that Parliament is sovereign.
Yeah.
Okay, well, where does BBC monitoring fit in the BBC at large? This was part of the exposure we did a couple of years ago on the BBC, but it's still valid. Let's remember we've got a £3.65 billion propaganda machine, and here's BBC monitoring tucked away in the middle of it. And as we reported at the time, BBC monitoring is to be funded by licence fee payers. Well, it was to be from 2013-14, but that's being debated at the moment. So it employs 370 people. It sells its material for money. Questionable whether that comes back into the pockets of the taxpayer. And the other part of the BBC we've consistently warned about is BBC Media Action. This is supposedly a charity, but here's Juliet Harkin, the former BBC Media Action project manager and an expert on Syria. She said, we, the BBC Media Action, worked in 2004 with individuals within the ministry who wanted change and tried to get them to be drivers of that. All media development work that has been done in Syria has, in my opinion, been predicated upon this idea that there can be change from within. You have an authoritarian regime, you find who the reformers are within that, and you work with them. This is subversion, Mike. Well, this is the BBC committing subversion, the overthrow of a nation state by creating unrest inside the country.
She's admitting that the BBC Media Action started the Syrian war.
Well, this is absolutely
it's
true.
Tantamount to what she's doing.
And the greatest lie is that we're led to believe that BBC Media Action is independent of the BBC, when in fact they share pension pots, they share offices. So here is an admission that the British Broadcasting Corporation runs a supposed charity which was directly working to help destabilise and overthrow the Assad regime. And we've reported on the work of the BBC. This was the article, BBC Media Action, Subversion from Broadcasting House to Kazakhstan. If you haven't read it, go on the UK column website and you can call it up. And we're also going to say this is one of the article that we did actually translate into Russian with the help of one of our supporters. And we understand that article has been widely read, not only by Russia Today, but we believe by other agencies inside Russia. And of course, they're very welcome to that information. So we just remind people here with a little caption at the top of that slide, thank you, Mike, that the BBC is busy subverting companies and gets paid for by the taxpayer. But Russia Today, that points a finger saying what's going on, gets its funding pulled by the British government.
Or does it? Because, of course, this continues and RBS, NatWest, who owns RBS, RBS that owns NatWest, is complaining that really they're being misrepresented. It hasn't closed RT's bank accounts at all. The Scotsman here is saying that these claims have been denied by the bank. It says that they've not closed any accounts belonging to RT, and they claim that a redacted letter from NatWest published on RT's website was relating to a different company. Didn't look like a different company to me. It says, this article says, it is believed, I'd like to know by whom, it is believed the company involved is a supplier of the firm with no obvious financial links to RT. Let's all get stranger and stranger.
So it's all got very confused all of a sudden.
Maybe they're backtracking as quickly as they possibly can. Russia, in the meantime, saying that they will retaliate against British media. And of course, by that's most likely to be the BBC, because the BBC has large offices in Moscow, runs a Russian language propaganda outlet over there. And so Russia's saying that they will retaliate if this continues. But we will watch with interest.
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating what's going on at the moment. So Russia today is putting out information which our media acknowledges is reporting stuff that's simply not reported in the British press and television. But if you get too good at pushing out media, you get closed down or dirty tricks in the background.
And Press Gazette here reporting, well, we reported this to some degree about a year or so ago because various media outlets, Reuters and so on, starting to use computer algorithms in order to automatically generate articles. And up until now, it has been mainly hoovering up data on company annual statistics and so on, profit reports and this kind of stuff. And they've been producing automated reports as a result. The Press Gazette here really saying that we're going to roll that out across business reporting, sport and elections coverage. So it's going to be rolled out much broader. Now, bearing in mind the standard of mainstream journalism at the moment, which is pretty low, is this going to be an improvement?
Well, we've got to say no. I think with a bit of black humour, we'd like to say no, it won't, because the average standard of mainstream reporters is robotic. But this just means that we're going to have no idea whether what we're reading is real or has actually been touched by a human at all.
Yeah.
It's got to be unbelievably dangerous.
Right. Now, moving on to Syria then. Yesterday, we reported that Russia decided to halt its air bombardment of eastern Aleppo, and that halt seems to be still in place. That's a bit longer than was expected. So this is 24 hours after the beginning. Now, what we were told through Vanessa Beeley a few days ago is that there has been a deal done between the Syrian government and the rebels, in inverted commas, inside eastern Aleppo. They will be allowed to come out with one rifle. They'll be allowed to come out with their families, their wives and children, and they'll be taken to Idlib by bus. And therefore, anybody left behind, and in fact, in the original press release from the Russians, they said that there would be humanitarian corridors made available. And that seems to be what is going on here. So anybody left behind are people that are really determined to stay behind. And so, Brian, it looks to me like the next step for Russia will be to flatten the place.
Well, I'm going to say, if we think about this in hard military terms, what do the Russians not want to do? They don't want to get involved in hand-to-hand fighting, street fighting in a derelict urban area. They've been through Leningrad. That's what that battle was about, and it stopped a whole German army. So the sensible thing is you make people a reasonable offer to leave and get out. The people who are going to remain are going to be hardcore terrorists, and obviously the Russians are going to use whatever weapons against them they see fit. But what we see is a properly calculated plan here as to what's going to happen. Whereas what do we see from Britain and America? Words, but nothing of any substance about how this conflict is going to be stopped or how the terrorists are going to be stopped. So at the moment, I think once again we're seeing Russia coming out with a plan that makes sense and makes Obama and Theresa May look incredibly foolish.
Right. And in the meantime, Russia pretty upset with the allegations that Belgium has been bombing other parts of Syria, and they called on. Belgium is denying these claims, or at least they're dismissing them, as Sputnik says it here. Belgium is not involved in Aleppo strikes. This is Russian disinformation, according to the Belgians. But what Russia is saying is that Russian or Syrian aircraft were not operating in the area, that there were 2 Belgian F-16s in the air at the time, and they're saying that they're expecting, the United States in particular to criticize what has happened here, but of course that will not be forthcoming. And in the meantime, airstrikes do continue in other parts of Syria. So this from Fars here saying that ISIS in Homs, I think this is north of Homs, heavily bombarded. They've suffered some pretty significant losses there. But in the meantime, of course, we have the Battle of Mosul going on, and a nice big corridor, a nice big wide corridor created there as well, so that ISIS gets the opportunity to escape in amongst what the Foreign Office says will be 1 million people moving out of that city as the bombardment continues.
And of course, that movement of people will then be directly blamed on the Russians. So whereas the whole conflict has been obviously kick-started.
No, I'm talking about Mosul here in Iraq. So Western-backed Iraqi troops are trying to clear out ISIS in Mosul. Of course, they've had 3 or 4 weeks warning that that's going to happen. And the city has not been encircled, which means that people will be leaving through a particular corridor. How do you identify ISIS fighters in amongst 1 million other people? It's impossible.
Yeah.
So they're going to head off to Syria to reinforce the continuing losses over there.
Okay. Well, we'll end the news today by just saying that we're becoming increasingly concerned at the lack of contact with the Doherty family. And the Doherty family, 4 children taken away after they simply reported a man for making an approach to buy one of their boys, and the inference was that that was a paedophile approach to buy the child in order to abuse them. The children taken away at gunpoint in Ireland, and we have to say that we're becoming increasingly concerned because we don't have communications with the family. So we will be putting out a more detailed report about this tomorrow. But if there is anybody listening to the UK column broadcast, if you're in contact with the Doherty family, we would like to know that they're safe and well. We do have reason to be very fearful for their safety in a location in Ireland. And it's important that we do get some feedback on what's happening and that they're okay. I think that's it, Mike. What a state of the country in 2016. We can see it unfolding. What is the transformation agenda, the change agenda? This is to bring in the communitarian state. This is centralized government control. But of course, it's not for the public benefit. This is going to be for the benefit of the corporations who are literally going to be making profit from everything. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.